Welcome, everyone. My name is Dana White. Welcome to the Myth Salon. Well, today we have an extra special Myth Salon on mandalas with Susanne Fincher and an entire panel of mandala experts, scholars, and artists. Before I begin, I would like to read a short poem by a mandala artist from Kentucky, a woman named Jackie Reinert. It's a beautiful little poem. Line by line, I paint my life with tiny grains of sand, choosing my colors carefully and placing each grain by hand. With all my focused determination, there are no others I find who could appreciate this complete control and see the mandala in my mind. Insane whirls and maddening shapes, chaos at my every command. Not one color falls out of line I receive as I demand. Life spiraling from heaven to hell as sand gives way to earth. The closer I get to euphoria, the closer I am to rebirth. My final idea realized, I placed the last grain today. But there was no one left to protect it, so the wind just blew it away. So I'd like to have a moment of silence for her passing a few years ago, to her family who now goes on without her, to all of us who must endure the life we have without those who are near and dear to us. The Myth Salon would not be what it is without my dear good friend and colleague, Linn. We wouldn't have started it, we wouldn't have continued it, but he is a blessing to me and the entire community of myth and scholarship. So Will, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Well, we're really excited for tonight. Dana and I have been working on a project around mandalas that hopefully we'll eventually get to talk about with everybody. And mandalas are obviously at the center. Hopefully that's not too cheesy, of Carl Jung's psychology. So we'll dive right in tonight. You all know Dana White, host of this Myth Salon, producer, publisher, contributing member of Pacifica's Myth faculty, and good guy. My name is Linn, moderator of these Myth Salons, founding chair of the General Education Department at Husson College, where I teach myth to storytellers, and host of the ZDF and Sky television series Myths, Greatest Mysteries in Humanity. We're joined by our good friend, Dr. Dennis Patrick Slattery, who's a distinguished emeritus professor in the Mythological Studies program at Pacifica Graduate Institute. He's the author, co-author, editor, or co-editor of 30 volumes, including 7 volumes of poetry and a novel. His latest collection of essays is The Way of Myth, Stories, Subtle Wisdom. His paintings, pottery, blogs, and book titles, as well as upcoming events and trips, can be found at DennisPatrickSlattery.com. Clay Boykin is back with us tonight, a former United States Marine Corps artillery officer who served as a unit-level executive officer and nuclear safety officer. Today, Clay is a business development, leadership, and organizational change management consultant, where he develops and enhances creative and counterintuitive thinking in individuals, teams in the corporate C-suite. Clay is the author of the book Circles of Men, a counterintuitive approach to creating men's groups, and is the creator and host of the podcast In Search of the New Compassionate Male, which my students responded to really significantly. I wanted to mention after our last event. Clay's next book, Unstuck, The Art of Creating a New Lens Through Which to See Our World, is due out mid next year. Catherine Hart is with us for the first time tonight, an artist, spiritual seeker, and Montessori teacher with a bachelor's in education and a master's in mythology and archetypal psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. We're joined tonight by Mary Clark, who is a licensed counselor with a Jungian transpersonal emphasis. She was an early student of Joan Kellogg's, art therapist and visionary. Marilyn has been a co-teacher with Susanne for many years, bringing Kellogg's archetypal stages of the great round mandala to persons in many different professions and life journeys. Concurrently, she is training therapists in a compatible transpersonal modality, the Bonnie method of guided imagery. We're joined tonight by Roberta Shoemaker-Beal. She was first a clinical art therapist, where she created an art therapy program at the Shepherd and Enoch Pratt Hospital in Townsend, Maryland. And as the founder of the Maryland Art Therapy Association, she later served on the board of the American Art Therapy Association. Shoemaker began working with art therapy master's trainings programs in the 70s, along with other pioneers of art therapy and with Joan Kellogg. Each was following Dr. Carl Jung's discoveries, as documented in the only book in his collected works focused on one symbol, the mandala, on mandala symbolism. Recognizing the significance of the circular design of what Jung called temenos dreams, Shoemaker studied the significance of outer sacred place drawings, resonant or not, with inner sacred space drawings. Serving on Jung Society boards in New Orleans and Austin, classes were possible to extend Jungian teaching on symbolism. A new focus on the mandala later evolved when her NASA-conscious researcher, author, and husband, James Beal, were invited to create labyrinths as living mandalas, coast to coast, for the turn of the millennium. Thanks for being with us tonight. Michael Carpenter. His professional life has moved from teacher and career counselor to organizational leadership of informational technology. He has always felt called by creative practice, which has allowed him to learn from a variety of teachers. He began blending art and spirituality through mandala practice about 15 years ago, but the discovery of Susanne Fincher's work and Kellogg's Great Round has allowed him to begin deep integration of his creative and spiritual practice. He's completed Suzanne's Creating Mandalas certification program twice, in the process of mapping the Great Round to the archetypal images of the Tarot Major Arcana and to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. As a longtime meditator and practitioner of Mahayana Buddhism, he deeply appreciates how mandala practice is helping him to go deeply into understand and befriend himself. Michael lives in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And finally, tonight we're with Susanne Fincher, who is a Jungian-oriented art therapist who offers online courses for people who want to learn about mandalas, circular forms that can hold deep personal meaning. Through her books, courses, newsletter, adult coloring books, and videos, she presents ways to create mandalas for insight, healing, and self-expression. And for more information, I'm going to share a couple links in our chat. Thanks for being here with us, Susanne. I hope you'll take us away.
Thanks, Will. All right, our subject tonight is mandalas, Jung, archetypes, and cultural myths. All right, so we are talking about mandalas tonight. And our fascination with mandalas is really decreed by the fact that we all exist in this beautiful cosmos where there is no beginning, there is no end, and there is the constant circling of elements and time and the qualities that within which we live and exist. These exist, and we exist within these spinning rhythms and motions at every level of existence. How could we not respond to circles in a special way? Our sun anchors the movements of our solar system, and these rhythms set in motion our seasons on Earth and the lights and rhythms of the stars that our ancestors have studied, that we still study today. And we move, even as we feel that we're firmly planted on Earth, we are moving in a huge circle around the sun. And this circle creates our seasons and creates our day and night, and these rhythms that really determine and shape our existence as human beings. So the Earth is our wonderful blue marble of a planet, and we have a constant companion in the moon. And the moon, through its different phases, has been a fascinating natural symbol for human beings since the very beginning of human beings walking on the planet. The different phases of the moon have acted as a natural symbol for human beings as our ancestors began to ponder what the mysteries of existence were, the coming and going, the waxing and the waning, the birthing, living, dying, and rebirthing that is so much a part of our existence. The beautiful qualities of the moon, the light, and the moon as a mediator for the light of the sun. These qualities make it so very important for us. And our ancestors, no doubt, responded very strongly to these natural symbols, the moon and the sun, and began to depict them in their artwork. You can see the circle drawings in this painting on a rock somewhere in New Mexico, trying to capture not only the moon, but also depicting a concept of time, because beginning, middle, end, beginning is very much a part of the circle as well. That is an expression of the circle. Susanne Langer wrote of the moon, "No wonder men learn to contemplate the moon and to form notions of an individual life on the model of that cycle." Here's an example of a system of thought originated by philosophers in China that is built on this quality of the moon, the change between light and dark, the dance we see, yin yang we're familiar with, and then the hexagrams that fill this circle. You'll see the unbroken lines at the top, broken lines at the bottom. Unbroken lines represent light, broken lines represent darkness. And so this circle is an expression of how light goes from fullness and shrinks more and more as it goes clockwise to complete darkness. So this would be like full moon transiting to new moon and back again. And overlaid in this system, we see the sun, the moon, the four cardinal directions, the seasons, the zodiac. All of these systems were supported. The development of this was supported by our sense of natural qualities of what people saw around themselves, the sun and the moon. And notice as I go through the presentation how this same thread of interface between where we're living and our thoughts, the thoughts of people all over the world, are shaped and carried by this same natural fact in which we live. Many rituals have been created to both mimic and join with these circular movements. We see this circle around the Kaaba in the Great Hajj, and a Mexican ritual of the sun, circle dances. People have literally moved in circles as an attempt to align themselves and come into harmony with these greater movements that they observed in the sky. Sufi dancers attempting to attain this wonderful sense of harmony with the planets. And we see around us in nature so many different circles, from the forms of animals and plants to the movements and the patterns created in fluids like water and air, clouds, all of this surrounding us. And people have begun to build things that respond to the natural forms. We see a cave here at the top, which is another kind of a circle, and below it is a moon gate built to honor the moon and just to allow a person to walk through a circle. What a wonderful experience. And beautiful domes that mimic the sense of being under the sky and all of the symbols that people experience from there. The medicine wheel, this is in Wyoming, and the Native Americans had ways of calculating and tracking the seasons, and this was very important for survival, to be able to calculate the exact time when they could expect the herds of buffalo to return again and feed the people. And Black Elk, the Lakota elder, wrote that everything an Indian does is in a circle. And that's because the power of the world always works in circles. And everything tries to be round. The sky is round, and I have heard the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. Mountains also have a circular form. Those that have a nice a symmetrical form like this one. And people have attempted to recreate this same sense of mountains in ritual settings. This is a several layered, this is a place of offerings that I photographed in India. But again, this sense of climbing the mountain. So this is going toward the center, but moving toward the center of the circle is also like ascending higher. And this is another quality of the circle, the special quality of the center of the circle. It's at a different level than the circumference. And we see forms like this that attempt to capture some of the quality of the mountain and provide a ritual space for people to circumambulate, to interact with this special form in circular movement. Lots of circular forms that inspire art expressions like the rose windows that are European mandalas, created to educate lay people who could not read the Bible before printed Bibles were available. They could study the rose windows and learn scripture. And flowers, the lotus is found in many Eastern versions of art. This is a Hindu yantra, and you can see literally the petals of the lotus depicted here. Really, in Hinduism, just the multiplicity of life is one of the qualities that is captured in their art and their philosophy as well. And the idea of just the churn of life, the generativity of life, undergirds the idea of the feminine quality of matter that takes form. This is a depiction of something called the Mahavijas. These forms are yantras that are based on the Kali, the goddess Kali. They're aspects of the goddess Kali. And the goddess Kali presides over time. And really, she is the essence of transitoriness. She is a source of creativity and also receives those who are dead back into be regenerated. And so these yantras, each one represents a different aspect of Kali, including the goddess Tara on the upper right and the goddess Kamala on the left of the top yantra, which is actually Kali's yantra. And I should say that a yantra is different from a mandala in that a yantra, well, the word yantra translates as like generator or fabricator, and suggests that through interacting with these forms, one can actually experience certain qualities of consciousness. So each of these mandalas represents a goddess for a different occasion or for a different need. And if you need comfort or you need to overcome spiritual difficulties, then you could make pujas to the goddess Tara. Or if you wanted to celebrate the very good luck and the abundance in your life, then you could make an offering to the goddess Kamala, and they would be happy. They would receive your offering and hopefully send you more of what you want. So this concept is known as a Shakti cluster, because you see in the center here, we have the representation of the goddess Kali, and then these other forms are like sparks from the fire. So they're aspects of the goddess that separate out and have their own existence to serve the needs of human beings. Also, in the southwest of this country, we have wonderful sand mandalas. Again, this sense of multiplicity, the grains of sand that it takes to build one of these is just phenomenal. And also pollen and special ground up minerals. There's just so much is put into one of these sand mandalas. This is a mandala, part of the Mexican Day of the Dead celebration. Again, the multiplicity, the just the materiality that goes into this beautiful rendition of something that has a limited lifespan. That this will be swept away, just like the sand mandalas that the Tibetans create. This is another Mexican rendition of a mandala. And here we have an example of a mandala. Again, this is from the European tradition. Hildegard of Bingen was a remarkable nun, 1098 to 1179. She was a visionary who had visions of God as a circular form, and she had these painted. This is one of hers, and you can see how she has included the changes of the seasons and different occupations of people, the prevailing winds from different directions. There's quite a lot in this. This is her quotation. "The mystery of God hugs you in its all-encompassing arms." So this sense that the circle is a safe place and something like the arms of God, or perhaps even a symbol for God. This is part of our European tradition. It's not just a Far Eastern quality. This is another one of Hildegard's visions of heavenly choirs. Again, the interesting circular form that these faces of sweet angels just kind of stack up from the center. Or do they go down? Does it go down or up? It could be going either way, but the center is open, and it's like it's in an invitation to dive right through the center, go to another level of understanding. Also, people use mandalas, creating mandalas, as a sort of exploration of a personal relationship with God, and celebrating, and this is like a visual prayer. Another way to use circles to pray. A painting from Mexico depicting the lake goddess that brought wonderful fish to Lake Chapala and allowed the people there to have the abundance to feed their families. And also the labyrinth has been mentioned, wonderful pathway to the center. You can never get lost in a labyrinth. You enter the labyrinth, and it's such a mystery, because as you walk the path to the center, sometimes it looks like you're moving away. You're not even moving toward the center, but if you keep your foot on the path, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you do arrive at the center without fail. And then you have a return path to take whatever wisdom you find in the center there and bring it out to share it. This is in Chartres Cathedral. Very elaborate labyrinth, and it's wonderful to be on a labyrinth when other people are walking it, because then it becomes like a kind of dance that you're doing together, a different kind of circle dance that moves the whole community into a higher level of sharing. Well, Buddha instigated a whole other stream of mandalas. Buddha received enlightenment when he was sitting under a Bodhi tree, and he touched his hand to the earth. He wanted the earth mother, the goddess of the earth, to witness his accomplishment of enlightenment. And to me, that is like his acknowledging that nature and the qualities of the earth and just the givens of this planet are really our springboard to higher levels of consciousness. And so these are the basic messages of the Buddha, that what you think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create. And in Tibetan Buddhism especially, the creation of mandalas has been a wonderful gift to our culture. All over the country, these monks are creating mandalas that bring peace and harmony, and we're so lucky to have them doing that work. And the message again is of just awesome beauty that is fragile and doesn't last. And that's the way it's meant to be. So these mandalas also are painted on cloth, and the Tibetan mandalas depict the cosmos. It's an attempt to capture a sense of the cosmos in order to offer the cosmos to all that is. And these painted mandalas really work as a map to enlightenment, so that meditators can literally let their eye travel over this pattern in a certain way and be reminded of the symbols that teach them what they need to know, or to remind them of what they know, so that they can move from the outer edge of the circle into the very center, the heart of the circle, which is the square in this particular one. And that is the seat of the God, the seat of the deity with whom the meditator wants to merge. All right, so on the very outer, well, let's see, it's a little confusing in this drawing, but most outermost circle is a circle of fire, which is really the first step on the trail to enlightenment, where one has to confront ignorance and the mistaken beliefs that cause suffering, and to burn that ignorance away. And that's the first step toward the center with these mandalas. And here's another version of a mandala that is really created. This is more acknowledging the solar and lunar qualities of our existence. This is the Surya, the sun god. And you can see concentric circles that represent 8 planetary deities and 28 constellations and the 12 zodiac symbols. So another way of encapsulating the wonder of movement and the qualities of the rhythms of life on Earth. There are also a number of European mandalas in the Hermetic tradition. This is an example of one. And this also incorporates qualities of the moon phases. You can see the little circles that touch the large circle depict different phases of the moon. And then there's also 28 mansions of the moon included in the same patterning that where you see those phases of the moon. A reference to the symbolism of different phases of life. For instance, the waxing moon is symbolic of infancy, the beginning stage of enlightenment, and the full moon is maturity or attainment, and the waning moon is indicative of old age, and then the new moon represents death and reincarnation. So there's a space at the center of these mandalas where one can focus attention as you work to integrate the meaning of the symbols around the center. And this trend of mandalas and Hermetic tradition feeds into Kabbalah, which is another esoteric tradition in European thought. Over here on the left, this mandala represents the states of progression that alchemists strive to follow. You can see down at the bottom, there's a group of 5 alchemists who have attained to a certain level of realization, and so they will be moving up to the figure, up to the next plane, which is framed with rose bushes there on 3 sides. And these symbols, they will study to train their thoughts in these patterns of transcendence. So you can see there's a lot of European tradition around mandalas as well. Islam forbids the showing of images of holy people, holy personages. And so there's a great emphasis on calligraphy as an expression of the divine through hands and sacred geometry. This is a lovely example. And the calligraphy, here's another beautiful example that grows from or emanates from that sense of the divine through the hands of the calligrapher. For us, really, though, life begins in the womb. And this is where our imprinting of mandalas really gets serious and deep, because we're imprinted with these circles from the beginning of our existence. We are nurtured in the womb, which is a circular form. We are literally held in the circle until birth. And when we experience birth, we move through the circular birth canal and emerge through the circular opening to discover nourishment in the circular form of our mother's breast. And we also discover that the edge of the circle that babies love to gaze at, the edge of the circle, the edge of the face creates a circle. And so this loving gaze between the baby and the mother is so important for survival. Here again, the circle is encoded as a survival mechanism. And we're born into a family circle, and that's another circle that imprints us, a sense of being in the group, not outside the group, in the circle, not outside. And there's the joy of movement, the circling movements that we love when we're kids, and these are carried over into the motions that children love to make, the circular motions. And so their muscles develop so that they can draw mandalas. The very first mandalas that we create are the ones we do as children. It's typical of children at around ages 3, 4, 2.5, 3, 4, to create these mandala drawings, these drawings of people with arms, with sticks for arms and legs. And really, I feel like these drawings that children are doing are really a very good rendition of what they see when they look down at their own bodies. So this is not a crude attempt at drawing a human body. This is really children drawing what they see when they lie in their cribs and look down at their bodies. It's a way to depict that. But it's very interesting, too, that at the time when children are drawing these mandala drawings, they're shifting in their use of words from describing themselves in the third person as Johnny wants this or Susie wants that. They shift to saying, I want this, or I am doing this. So that shift from third person to singular, a sense of personhood and claiming consciousness as an individual, is marked and I think moderated by this natural mandala drawing that children do. And so whenever we as adults come to a difficult time in our lives, it's natural to return back to these earlier levels of functioning And creating a mandala is a natural healing process that whereby it's like touching home base so that we can then rebirth ourselves in a more integrated form. Once we attain adulthood, then many of us begin to wonder more about who we are. We have questions. And Carl Jung was so helpful to those of us who want to know more about ourselves. He wrote about mandalas and felt that mandalas symbolize a place of refuge, a sense of wholeness, and that people naturally gravitate toward creating mandalas when they're at a stressful time in their lives. This is an example of one of his mandalas. He created some very wonderful ones. And this is a diagram of his concept of the person. You see, it is a mandala. And you'll notice that it's divided between conscious and unconscious sides, and that there is the ego on the left and the shadow on the right. To Jung, the ego was a construction that is arrived at by picking the qualities that your family circle likes and integrating them, claiming them as your own. That's how we create who we think we are. And through that process of creation, we create a mirror image. The mirror image of the ego is the shadow. So whatever quality you have that you claim for yourself, like you're punctual or you're creative or you're neat, rest assured that in your unconscious, the opposite of that resides. So life, according to Jung, is an attempt to merge these separated qualities into a pattern of wholeness. And that is moderated by the small, what the small circle in the center represents. It's identified as individual here. I think of it as self with a capital S, that archetypal center of the potentials encoded in us before conception, I think, and that our life is our living out our potentials as best we can. So when life throws us a shock or a surprise, or let's say that you get a diagnosis that you weren't expecting, or your marriage falls apart, or your child runs away from home, these things that really challenge who you think you are. And let's say that you just cannot cope, that it's too stressful. Who you think you are is not big enough to manage whatever life throws at you, and you fall apart. Well, this archetype of the self acts as a sort of guarantor and comes forward and carries those broken pieces of who you are at that moment until you can reconstitute yourself into a new ego, a new ego organization that is really more complex and more stable than you were before. And so during that period of time when you've fallen apart and the self is carrying you, those are the times when you're compelled to create mandalas. You don't know why. It just making a circle feels right, and I just have to do it. It's the archetype of the self that is stimulating you to do that, and it's a restorative process. Well, I happen to believe that you don't have to wait until you're falling apart to benefit from creating mandalas. That creating mandalas can be a way to open a dialogue with the hidden parts of yourself, the unconscious, so that in the ego that you are, the ego that you know yourself to be, you can join with those unconscious aspects of yourself instead of being, knocked off balance by them. You can more and more integrate shadow qualities that you might at one time have tried to, deny. But that's the way that you grow toward wholeness, is by integrating unconscious into conscious more and more as time goes on. This is the first mandala that I created, and there's nothing really special about it. I just went to the grocery store and bought some magic markers and a sketch pad, and I was just playing around with the colors of the magic markers, making a stripe for each one. But it meant so much to me, creating this mandala. It was soothing and helped me feel calm and protected. And there's just, it's a wonderful experience to move into mandala in that way. And I just want to show a few examples of mandalas. There's such a variety of mandalas, the way we create them now. We, in the States and in the tradition of our teacher, Joan Kellogg, the spontaneous mandalas that people create. I'll just run through some of these examples so you can see the variety. They can be very colorful. They can be tracings of feet or hands. They can be made with paint or collage with paper. They can be used as a process of discernment. Or this was done by a cancer patient, and her efforts that were successful to stay alive. Sometimes they're very strictly ordered. Sometimes have scalloped edges. There's really, I believe, there's no right or wrong way about how to create a mandala. That it's the impetus of the creator, the inspiration of the artist, and that it's an expression of who they are in that moment of time and where they are. I feel that the mandala that we create expresses not only who we are, but where and when we are. And sometimes that it is during a dark night of the soul, and our mandalas may look more stressed out, like this one. Or sometimes it's just that we need to surrender accustomed ways of looking at things. This is a friend's collection of all the eyeglasses that she no longer needed. These were literally viewpoints that she was surrendering to the mandala. Or sometimes it's just a shift in perception, and the mandala can give us this message. And the messages can be surprising in a mandala, or they can be expected. We can reach for them, but so often they bring us wonderful surprises. And when things go well, it's very wonderful. the planets, the moon, the sun aligns, and we feel that everything is in order. And the dance is perfect and right and worthy. And this brings me to Joan Kellogg, an American art therapist who began to collect hundreds of mandala drawings from the patients she worked with in hospitals and research programs. And she divided all of these mandalas she collected. She found that they settled into 12 piles. This is her quote: I could not imagine there not being order. And so she discovered 12 archetypal stages of mandala. And she was inspired by the idea of the Shakti clusters that I described earlier, so that her forms kind of resemble some of those Shakti, the idea of every stage of these mandalas representing different qualities of consciousness and different experiences through a lifetime. So these are visual metaphors of how consciousness works. And you can see her names for these stages down at the bottom. They're numbered beginning at stage 1, which is void or resting in the darkness, which is like being asleep. And then moving clockwise around this mandala of mandalas, with each stage being an awakening and an integration, an expansion, and a reaping of rewards, and a continuation, the natural continuation of the life cycle, which is, reaping the rewards and then releasing form to return back to darkness, back to the earth, to be reformed for the next circle of the round. And I have here examples. No, I'm going to see if I can move this over a little bit. I just want to talk about the great round as exemplified on through the experience of the little pie maker. Dana, is there some way I can manipulate this to show more of the slide, or can I turn off people's pictures for just a minute? Or do we have to do that ourselves?
The rest of us only see the slides.
Okay, perfect. Good.
And you.
All right. So the little pie maker at stage 1 is asleep in a dreamless sleep. And then she begins to wake up. She has a pleasant dream of something good tasting, but nothing more than that. And then she's more awake in the 3rd stage, where she begins to think, I have an idea for something I could make. I don't really know how to do it. I just know the next thing to do is to go and talk with my mother and find out what she can tell me. And so the little pie maker's family has this. Her mother is a wonderful maker of brownies. That's the family tradition. And so the little pie maker learns how to make brownies. But then she realizes, that she doesn't want to make brownies. She tells her mom, no, Mom, I have in mind something different to do. And Mom is a little puzzled and upset. You see that in stage 5. But then the little pie maker goes on to study in earnest. She takes from her father what is valuable for her in what she wants to do with her life, and from her mother, and she releases what she doesn't need from her mother and her father, and she becomes a certified pie maker in stage 7. You see, she has the chef's hat, she has the training. Notice she still hasn't done anything, though. It's just all been training up until this point. But then in the stage 8, that's when she really produces. She perfects her pies. She gains a reputation as an excellent pie maker and starts producing for some of the best restaurants in town. And she gets accolades. She writes a cookbook and shares her recipes. And she is just so gratified in stage 9 by having accomplished what she only dreamed of in stage 2. She's brought it to fruition by stage 9. But then by stage 10, well, she's become maybe just a little bored with making pies. And it just doesn't have the interest for her that it once did. She wisely surrenders and lets go of what was. She cuts up her pies, she serves them out to people, that lets them go. And what she's left with is a warm feeling, an awareness, a gratitude for all that was, for all of these stages, and the wisdom to see that there were no false steps. Each and every experience of the round was necessary in order for her to arrive at this place of realization, of transcendence, of an experience of grace and accomplishment. And she carries that wisdom like a seed with her into a return to stage 1. It's like a reseeding of herself to grow another series of great round. And so these stages are both literal and metaphorical. So they literally depict stages in a human life, beginning with early life experiences in stages 1 through 4, and then stages 5, 6, 7. People grow into adulthood in these stages, and stages 8 and 9 refer to middle age, the accomplishments of adulthood and maturity. And then the return journey through aging and eventually death are depicted. So we metaphorically move through our aging and death, and then rebirth through experiencing these stages of the great round. And so this is how it works. And so in creating our mandalas, like I said, there's no right or wrong way about how to do it, but I like to draw a circle and then just fill in the circle with color and form. There are lots of different ways to do it. You can use sacred geometry as well, but this is the way to create mandalas in the tradition of Joan Kellogg. And this is how she taught us to interpret your mandala, to get the messages from your unconscious that your mandala is bringing you, because your mandala is like a mirror that shows you what's happening with yourself. And if you can learn to interpret your symbols, then you can learn what's in your unconscious and develop that relationship. So you find the top and mark it with a small t, and then you give your mandala a title. It can be silly or banal or ridiculous. It doesn't matter. It can be whatever you like or whatever comes to you. You shouldn't think too much about it. And then you list the colors you used in your mandala and your free associations. This is a journaling process, this interpretation. So you write down your associations to the colors, and you do the same thing for the forms you used in your mandala. And then you read back through everything from the title through all of your associations and find a theme that you can express in a sentence or two. And that's the interpretation of your mandala. So the creator of the mandala is the ultimate expert on what the mandala means. I cannot tell you what your mandala means. You tell you what your mandala means. So that's it. This is my website, creatingmandalas.com. And I will stop this screen sharing and we can have an interesting discussion.
You know, I remember I was at a Jung Institute event in LA, and there was a woman from Brown, and she was there from an art program. And what she was saying is it's so sad how much the Jungian community doesn't really interact and respect the artist as a scholarly participant in the conversation. And I'm not sure that's entirely true, but I'm absolutely true that what you're doing with your work on mandalas really invites that synergy. And I know that we have some artists here tonight, and I thought maybe we could start there. Michael, or any of you who have worked with mandala as art, I wonder if you could talk about what it's done for you.
Well, I think first of all, I think I started working with more Tibetan kind of models 10 or 12 years ago. But not until I really started working with Joan and Susanne's method did it really start changing me. First, it changed me as an artist. It allowed me to let go of that fear of being good enough, that constant intrusion of ego and performance anxiety that seems to just tracked me through my whole artistic career. And it really allowed me to take it on as a sense of play and a sense of exploration and a reverence of process rather than freaking out about the quality of it. So initially, it just made it made my artistic practice much more wonderful. But it has also allowed me to integrate my spiritual life and my creative life in ways that I never would have thought possible. The latest project that I did really mapped the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to the Great Round. And this whole process of recovery that goes on is one of confronting and integrating and ultimately befriending the shadow. And this whole process has been so helpful to me in being able to do that. So I think that's most of it. Also, the fact that it's not about words makes it, it's the fact that it is about image and about body. It's an embodiment practice, brings a truth, at least from my own practice, that is much richer than I get to with simply words.
Yeah, Susanne, do you have thoughts about that, about working directly with artists and what Michael's saying and how this participates in the artist's imagination?
Well, I think that artists really benefit from creating mandalas. A number of artists have come through my workshops, and many of them express the same. Well, there's so much emphasis on training, on learning skills, that the way artists are trained in our culture. And so to be able to find a way to go beyond that training, I think is the main benefit for artists, to tap into something more genuinely their own. I wish more artists would come. I hope they will. And I would love to see mandalas painted on all the buildings in a city. I think we'd all benefit from that.
That would be wonderful. I agree. Gosh, even if we just project them up there if we have to. Wonderful. Yeah. Catherine, I see you have your mute off. Do you have some thoughts for us?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank Susanne so much. This was so inspiring, and I would love to come and work with you.
Please do.
When you were talking about the lotus, and it occurred to me that I've done something. I don't know my there. You can see a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Some of gosh, I don't know, that fade out thing is.
Yeah.
But to work with this is double. This is the 16 petals of the lotus. But what I have found, first of all, the painting of mandalas came to me, as you were talking about, at a difficult time in my life. And so they were very healing and centering. And I just kept doing them. Enough so that I had to wear like a wristband and, to tend to my physical nature, because I was just doing it for 8 hours a day, but very healing and very centering as they are. But what I've also thought about is, as a Montessori teacher, these things that I would say to the children, which is come to circle. Yes. Every morning, we begin our day with coming to circle, sitting in circle, being in circle. And so much of that kind of interaction with the children would be in a circular fashion then as well. So to take it outside of the art of it and how we live this, and certainly, I no longer teach, but I work with, I volunteer with a friend who is a teacher at a school for kids with learning differences. And I teach art to them. And they always begin with the circle.
Yes.
And I just encourage that of continuing, on and on out from that center. So it helps to, I see when they are painting that, as when I am, that it's a centering, it's a bringing in, it's like a meditation. And so it answers a need within them as well. Another interesting thing that I wanted to share is that it's interesting when I have sold paintings and I inquire with the buyers, like, what is it that resonates with you about this mandala? And often it's so unconscious that they can't articulate what it really is. And yet there's something that resonates with them.
Yeah.
And I have found with all the mandalas, as I paint them, as I walk the labyrinth, as I encourage children to be in circle, that there is a coming home, if you will, a coming to center with that. And it's just a beautiful thing.
It is. Yes. I think that it is a straight trip back to the core identity that we are, which was formulated when we were around, 1, 2, 3. That's the home that we're returning to, or even earlier in the womb, that. Yeah.
Well, I love that you pointed that out, because it, certainly in looking at the history of the mandala, that it has always been here.
Yes.
It has always been here. Living in the Southwest in Santa Fe, and having the privilege to see all of this Native American, the petroglyphs that are ancient, and it's always there. The spirals, the circles within circles.
Mhm.
It's something that is just core to our soul, I believe,
Yes.
to our being.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know what you're saying about like just drawing for 8 hours. I've sometimes I think that literally the mandala like is like a drain and you're drawing yourself into it. I've certainly felt that pull.
But recently I really connected with the joy of just drawing a circle. And the way I like to do it is to do it in chalk. So there's a little powder, and then just go over it and over it with my hand. And there's actually a story, the Tsongkhapa, an adept, very wonderful Tibetan monk, didn't have materials to make a mandala. So he sat in front of his cave and did the circle with the side of his hand on a rock until he wore the flesh off of his hand. So he didn't have a brace to put on his wrist like Catherine, but that circling movement is so fundamental and takes us to heart center in some way that's just magical.
I wanted to observe, Susanne, that you were holding your hand like this. And that is so more connected, I think, physically with the body than, holding a instrument.
It's stirring.
Yes, stirring, moving. So I saw that. It's key, I think. It's key to being a part of that movement rather than a more controlled holding of an instrument.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, we've got some new friends and some old friends here, eager to hear from y'all. Whoever's got some thoughts. I see some mandalas behind you, Marilyn. Those look great. I bet all of us have mandalas in our rooms. It's kind of who we are. But whoever would like to jump in. Hey, Dennis, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, for Susanne, that was so marvelous. I have 3 pages of notes, and geez, I'd like to sit down with you for about 3 hours and hash through some of them. But Michael, you touched on something that was important to me. My medium has been words, sentences, language, books. But 11 years ago, I accepted an invitation by a former student of mine, who's a professional artist and does very well, to start taking painting classes with her. And so I did. And this is where I drive over to Wimberley, Roberta, and take classes every Thursday morning. But when the Red Book came out in the large version, something about Jung's paintings hit me right in the center of where I live. And about 3 years ago, maybe 4, I was called to his mandalas. I'm going to share 2 of mine with you, and I hope these show up. Here's one. These are from the Red Book. And here's the second one, and I'll be brief because give other people time. And here was my thought. When I read, I often copy sentences down to get under the skin of what the words mean. So my fantasy was, I wonder if I painted Jung's paintings that I could get under the skin of his creative process. And Susanne, one of the many things that I liked of what you said is the first time that you painted a mandala, just playing with the colors, and how serene that made you feel.
Mhm.
Well, that's what happened to me painting Jung's work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love the repetition. I mean, I don't want to hold
Yeah.
him up again, but the repetition was mantric
Mhm.
and soothing. And Catherine, you were touching on some of the major feelings that I've had. And so my fantasy was not that I got under the skin of Jung, although I did sense something that I don't have language for. But I think I got in touch with something in me
Mhm.
that I had been not avoiding, but not paying attention to.
Yeah.
So many things that you said, Susanne, galvanized why I painted Jung's mandalas. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
I think, yeah, and Jung talked about letting the monsters speak. You know, that was part of the whole Red Book thing. And it's,
Yeah.
you know, I've looked at all these mandalas I've painted at various points when I thought I was coming unglued, and watching how the monsters become more friendly, or, you know, how they start to change. The
Mhm.
whole 12-step series I did, that they changed from horrifying at the beginning to more childlike. And, you know, that's about, I don't think you can do this without it being about you.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Whatever your
Yeah.
intentions are, it's still a self-portrait.
Yeah. And, you know, the Greeks understood that with Aristotle's work about mimesis, that we're always in this desire or impulse to represent ourselves in the world mimetically. And so I think that's another one of those human impulses that stay with us from birth to death,
Yes.
to imitate ourselves through a different medium or through a friendship, or, well, there's 10,000 different ways. Yeah.
It's a creative act, isn't it? Self-created, self-creation.
Yes.
I think about I believe it was Paradise Lost, where the version of Eve in Paradise Lost looks at herself in reflection, and that this sets up the self-awareness required to take the apple. And so it's that seeing yourself that gives us that self-awareness. And I'm thinking about what y'all are saying about how much self is in these mandalas. And I'm back to what Susanne was saying about how these kids have that transitional part of their own growth from third person to first person at the time where the mandalas naturally occur. I don't have anything new to add to that except for how stunning and interesting and right that feels.
I might add to that. When Susanne showed the pictures of child development and showed the mandala appearing as the first symbol, it appears from the point of view of a developmentalist that is the beginning of the self. And one thing that I really appreciate about Joan Kellogg was, knowing her back in the 70s, she introduced me to the concept of the sacred void. And you notice that first position is the void. And Jung said something very important. He said, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light of meaning in the darkness of mere being. And in that darkness, which Joan Kellogg introduced me to the concept of the sacred void, that for those of us who are brave enough to surrender into that darkness, and we do that naturally every night in sleep, but when we do it in a waking state, like Michael and Catherine have talked about, they were in a very unpleasant place. Their life was, and Catherine discovered the mandala. Out of that darkness, she discovered, if I may paraphrase the way I understood it, Catherine, is you found a light. You found something that so energized you that you wanted to put a wristband on because you had found your light. You had,
Right.
and that bridge, I think that Joan Kellogg offered to me helped me so much understand how the patients I was working with then at the hospital, a psychiatric hospital, that they needed to give up who they were because it was dysfunctional. They came into the hospital because they weren't functional anymore. They needed help. They were inpatients in a psychiatric hospital. So to trust giving up who they were, that dysfunctional ego, and surrender to the unknown, which might be another name for the darkness, and to know that there's a seed in the future, that someplace inside of you there is that light that can seed your future, that can energize you, the way Catherine, you so beautifully talked about that, and so did Michael. And I think that, Susanne, you described that so well today when you talked about the 12 stages. Because if you remember that Jung map, there's a lot of our life that's conscious, but it's surrendering to the unknown and the unconscious that's so scary.
Mhm.
And Michael mentioned, oh, that's where the monsters are. They're in the darkness. And yet somehow, if you go into the darkness and start the dialogue, they become childlike again. They become something that can give you the beginning of a whole next chapter of the next round of the mandala, the next experience that, if you're brave enough, you will go ahead and take. And thank you for that description of the 12 stages. I don't know if you can put that slide up again, Susanne. That was so beautifully spoken. I felt like Joan was back with us. Thank you.
If I could share one of the paintings I did, and Michael, what you mentioned about the shadow really brought this up for me. I'm so wait, let's see if I can, it's not gonna work. There we go.
By your ear.
But there, possibly you can see
I can
that
see it. Yeah.
there's darkness, there are dark circles on the outer edge.
Mhm.
Now, so the center and the color all work with, going to the center. But what came to me after I had painted this, and I put black rather chaotically, it was not in the mandala order, if you will.
Mhm.
And Michael, what you talked about as the shadow is what that represented, is what felt chaotic and dark to me and unknown. And so to see that is represented on the outer edges of the center, the home, the order, still it's the unconscious, but it then comes out into the shadow that felt even more chaotic for me. And it's just a enlightening thing to see this.
In our workshops, there's one stage 11 of the Great Round, because we guide people through all of these stages that in our trainings. We invite people to make the ugliest mandala they possibly can, to work with colors they hate, that they have never used, and so to go straight into the shadow. But the interesting thing is, the mandalas that people create are the most lovely that they have made for the whole week. They are set free from the attempt to do something beautiful and balanced, and they do something really lively and wonderful. So let the monsters speak.
Clay, I saw that you had your mute off a little bit ago. Do you want to jump in with us?
Well, yes.
And we'll come to Marilyn.
I'm fascinated with the artistic aspects of the mandalas and the symbology that comes along with that. You had one that you put up briefly that you described as discernment,
Yeah.
and it was full of words.
Mhm.
And that, I believe, was the only one that had words other than the calligraphy,
Mhm.
Islam,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that, because I work with words
Mhm.
and the spatial relationships between words as symbols, and the notion or the element of quaternity. And so for me, my basic mandala is the relationship between fear and love and darkness and light. And within that whole area, what is fear and light? Well, I say religious tradition fits there. And what's common amongst all religious traditions is the golden rule, or compassion. Love and darkness speaks of compassion. And so I'm curious if that comes up in any of the work that you do or that you see, the idea of quaternity and spatial relationships between words, and this whole idea of discernment.
Yeah, that mandala that you're referencing was one that I did. And so I remember it well. And it was, I set about to explore my shadow with that. So you could say that was dark and light, or, well, you're describing, it's like it's double pairs of opposites is what you're working with in your ideation. I prefer not to work with words, and of the people I have encountered, I have not met anybody like you that works with words in the way you do. No, but I encourage you you might be interested. You know, your tradition is more like the esoteric tradition. You remember the mandalas that I showed in the Hermetic tradition? Really, I would say your work, it fits more in there, which is just a different way to work. You know, it's more mental, more thinking, not so much feeling.
Yeah, I agree with you. And my interpretation, or what I witness with working with mandalas, is that the mandala itself, to me, is a field of infinite possibility through which my unconscious can come through into my consciousness. And that infinite field is a place for me to put the prima materia, to find order to it, to be able to put things into context. So thank you very much. This is fascinating evening, and I've taken lots of notes, and I've drawn a mandala of the evening.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Clay.
Thank you.
I'd like to see the mandala of the evening.
Marilyn, glad to finally hear from you.
Okay, well, this is nice to follow you, Clay, because I want to, somehow what you were saying is resonating with what I want to talk about. This is a mandala that I did some time ago, and it was within the process of the training that we do. As we're doing it, we get to also draw a lot of mandalas. So this would be a mandala that comes at stage 10, which is a time of moving towards death. And I have found that I'm really drawn in these this time, like from the beginning of the pandemic, it's also when so many of us went online, right? So we've been doing a lot more work with the mandalas since we went online with creating mandalas, Susanne, and the program that we have. I find that I really am drawn to expressing things about my concerns about the world, about the environment, about just, you know, how really scary all that is. I mean, it truly is. So this mandala was about that. And one of the things that we do is to consider whoever is guiding the process will give us and will give prompts. Think about this. So what would you think about? So what I wrote with this as I looked at it was, I am holding your fear and your loss. And it was so helpful to get it out of my psyche and down on a piece of paper and let it be held here.
Mhm.
And when I look at it, you know, I feel that again. I feel, thank you. You're holding that for me. It's something that I experienced, and I probably have done a half a dozen mandalas that have had specifically to do with climate change. And it just is a way to express it. So somehow, Clay, that added into what you were saying. But thank you very much. It's been a delightful evening to be with you all.
Marilyn, can I ask you to send me some of those? I would love to see. You know, I work on another project separate from this with Climate Reality and the Harvard Alumni Association's climate group, and we do this whole boot camp for training people on climate responses. And I would love to see that work, and maybe it's a good image to share with people doing the work. You know,
Thank you.
and it
I'll
reminds
take some
me.
pictures.
Please. And it reminds me, I'm too dorky to skip this moment. You showed an image from von Bingen, and that image just happens to have some history with our group. So about a year, just a little less than a year ago, we did no, it was about a year ago, we did an event on the Green Knight movie that came out with A24. And in the Green Knight movie, we ended up doing a whole thing with them. A24 invited us, and we invited a bunch of people to go see the film and stuff like that. But the woman, Jade Healy, the art director, did a conversation with us. And the one file that we sent back and forth that she went out of the way to pull out of their archives for us to use on this project we made, which anybody can see going to mythhouse.org/The Green Knight. But it was exactly that image. And that in the movie, The Green Knight, they use von Bingen's image as the mandala showing and if you are familiar with the Green Knight, it is that story of going into winter and back, and it has that whole cyclical thing. And I just, you know, couldn't help but couldn't miss a chance to point that out. It's really cool. And, you know, Michael, you had something you wanted to jump in with, and I'm wondering if you want to bring it back to us.
I just wanted to comment on the kind of personal going into the unconscious and the monsters. And, you know, for me, this particular one, which, you know, it was really about reaching into the depths, but there's like a rose down there. And, you know, ultimately, one of the things that I've kind of learned out of this practice is that the darkness there's jewels in it. And I keep coming up with these mandalas that are split and have, you know, these lovely, luminous, sometimes unrecognizable things in their depths. And the other thing is just this whole sense of reaching and stretching down into your core or into your fears is very, very powerful. I find this very much an embodiment practice. You know, it's just so really lovely evening. I can't believe how much I've learned tonight. It's just, I feel very grateful for having had the opportunity to be part of it.
I'm struck how we think in pieces, but we're always whole. And wholeness is something that, while it may be obscured from us by what we do, our states of being are always whole. And religion will work with that. and it will try to restore something that is part of a lost kind of a consciousness. I'm really struck by a number of the poems that Rumi has. There's one where he says, out there there's a field. Come meet me there, beyond the differences, beyond the separations, beyond it. And we can find each other in projects, in relationships, because the whole world disappears into this mandala of a relational type of an experience. I was struck by, you all have seen me with the singing bowl. So I turned this over. This is the little rag that I put underneath it. And it has a kind of a mandala, you know?
Yeah.
We live in wholeness. We can't escape it. And yet we really need images in order to capture wholeness, to reinforce the fact that we never are far from the mother. And the mother is what keeps us and carries us and nurtures us, no matter how far we go, no matter who we become. We're always in that state of wholeness. And I really have enjoyed everyone in this tonight. This has really been, I knew it would be good, and I really apologize to everyone for, my faux pas at the very opening. And, I don't know, maybe I was just off center myself, but it's restorative to, kind of trip and fall in front of people,
It got us to where we are now.
It gets us there. I mean, we need every little bit of help from one another that we can possibly get. We have a few more minutes to kind of go around, but I was really struck by the Rumi field, by looking down at my little hot pad that I use. It does serve a function. I mean, it's supposed to keep my hand off it so that the singing bowl rings and it doesn't deaden it. But I kind of looked at it and I thought, it's a mandala.
Yeah. Well, and I was struck with the mandala of the sound that your singing bowl makes, just the sound waves traveling out.
Oh, I was gonna say, obviously, like in those sound waves are turned into mandalas. If any of us have watched somatics experiments,
yeah.
Right, gorgeous.
Well, and if you see it in water, what you have is something moving out from the center, and in a kind of a quasi-uniformative sort of state. We're creatures of the mandala.
Yeah, and we're mostly water. And so those same vibrational, we're part of those mandala waves from your singing bowl. It impacts our bodies and makes us part of that harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I see some final notes wanting to come in from Roberta and Dennis and Marilyn. I hope we can get to all of them. I see you, Dennis.
Well, I wanted to share with you all the last lines of Dante's Divine Comedy. So he begins in a dark wood. He's lost. He has no clue on which way to go until he gets a guide. And so he travels through 100 cantos in probably the most eloquent expression of the individuation process I've ever read. Dante was a Jungian way before Jung. But right at the end of the poem, this is what I want to share with you because it just seems to fit so well right here. He comes on this image of a circle, and there are 3 circles imposed on one another, and each is of a different color. And in the middle of it, he sees an effigy of a human being. And he can't understand what it is that he's looking at. But here's the part that I want to read to you. As the geometer intently seeks to square the circle, but he cannot reach through, though thought on thought, the principle he needs. So I search that strange sight. It's like a triple mandala. I wish to see the way in which our human effigy suited the circle and found place in it. I mean, he's finally coming home to himself. And my own wings were far too weak for that. I don't have the language to express it. I have the image, I can't find the language. But here's the turn that closes the poem. But then my mind was struck by light that flashed, and with this light, received what it had asked. Here, force failed my high fantasy, but my desire and will were moved already, like a wheel revolving uniformly by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. And that's his vision of wholeness.
Yeah.
And it comes, I mean, the circles, just circle after circle, and he's in it. He's in that mandalic imagination, and he's become whole, maybe for the first time. Yeah. So thanks for letting me read that. It's just it's such a powerful poem, and it fits the theme of tonight to a T. Yeah.
Strikes me that could have been T.S. Eliot in 4 quartets.
Yes.
Writing that in my end is my beginning.
Is my beginning. That's it.
And then he circumambulates through the garden, and the rose garden and the ash are united. And what you have is a complete history of existence coming to bear in these various poems that your mandalas are capturing, that image of wholeness. And I, like a lot of these people, I get caught in my words. I mean, my mind is not, it never saw a trap it couldn't walk into. And I try to get out. I would love to, I'm learning to feel more in my life and to let my heart take me to places. And I could use more counseling. And Catherine, who knows me deeply and dearly, if I could just turn my mind off and just feel, it would be wonderful, even for a moment, just find myself in this field and just let it happen. But words pop up like weeds. They're just there.
It seems to me, Dana, that you're there right now, that you're feeling very deeply.
But it disappears. It's like a moment of synchronicity. It'll happen, and it's like a deer in the headlights. Suddenly I see myself caught in motion, and my synchronicities. This is like, to me, it's what happens in the Tao, because the Tao is completely, everything is in sync. There's no problem at all. And that's why when we find synchronicities, they happen. But the Tao endures. They pass in front of me, and I notice moments of synchronicity. And as soon as I notice them, they evaporate, like water in an Andy Goldsworthy sidewalk, So what a delightful evening for everyone. I just, yes, go ahead.
I would like to say that whether it was your sense of synchronicity or your intuition, I think the timing of having this topic tonight was very synchronous for many people, because what you all may not know is that Susanne Fincher's book, Creating Mandalas, came out before the millennium. And a Jungian analyst, Dr. Robert Johnson, said, oh, this book is needed now. The drawing of mandalas and the focus on the mandalas will help us through this time of transition. And that was the millennium, which was startling and upsetting to some people. And then we had December the 12th, 2012, and we went through that transition, supposedly the end of the Mayan calendar. Well, right now, it's my understanding that we are in the last 4 years before the age of Aquarius, which all of us have passed through in our lives, will be anchored. And this is the time that anybody who hasn't done their work, I call Jungian work their self-work, this is the time it's going to hit them. So I thank you for offering this, you and Will, for offering this tonight, because I think it's needed. I think it's extremely timely that whatever aspect of you, your intuition, scheduled this for tonight. It was a wonderful thing to do, and I certainly enjoyed this evening. And I think picking Susanne, whose book has, as I said, been translated into 11 languages, it's needed. It's the mandala is needed when people are in crisis, and you have brought this forward. It's been called the big shift that we're going through, and it's chaotic and frightening for so many people. And now we know we all have the mandala. Just get a lid of a pan out of your kitchen and make a, Joan Kellogg used to say, a 12-inch circle, and go to it. And you've shared that with us tonight, and I thank you very, very much for creating this whole evening.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you. Thank you very much. Susanne, you really delivered. Thank you. Catherine, Marilyn, Dennis, Clay.
Will.
Michael.
And Michael.
And Michael.
You know,
Yep.
Michael.
I'm gonna, instead of relying on words, how about a sound or the lack thereof, and let's just have a moment of silence as we go forward.
I like it.
Bless you all. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, and happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving to all of you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, may you all have a
everyone.
centered Thanksgiving. Thank you very much.
Thanksgiving.
All right.
Beautiful.
Look for
Thank you.
circles.
Okay.
Look for circles.
All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.